Is the F4 Phantom one of your favorites? Well, we're continuing with video number 4 on the Skymaster XL F4 Phantom aircraft. Last video was all about tanks and tail hooks, so that's done. We're moving into wrapping up our back end here, and what I did is I got the lines all run to the Unilight afterburner light controller. Now the reason we're putting the light controller back there is because if we do it this way, when the rear part of the fuselage is separated from the front part of the fuselage, we've only got 2 leads here that we need to connect. If this was mounted in the front part of the fuselage, all those wires would come through and we'd have to figure out a connection for all 4 of those connectors. So this is just going to be nice and simple and easy, straightforward. So that is done. We've got them all run through our connectors here. Those are all shoe gooped in place. Our board is glued down to the base of the rear part of the fuselage. So that is done. Now, if you're just hopping on this build series, the reason we're making the rear part of the fuselage separatable from the front part of the fuselage is this aircraft is getting shipped to the other side of the world when it's completed. So we do need to be able to separate the fuselage sections, and that's why we've got things laid out the way we do. So we've got our main wire connectors here, we've got our airline for our chute mechanism, and the last thing is the leads coming from our afterburner setup. So I'm going to cut the servo lead here a little bit shorter and put a connector on there for servo lead, so that at least that part is done as well. So we'll get that finished. And once that's done, we are basically ready to join these 2 pieces so we can keep progressing forward. Now this fuselage is in 3 pieces. We've got our center section, our rear section, our front section, but we want to get the rear section installed so then we can start getting our pipes mounted, our turbines mounted, our equipment laid out as we move forward in this aircraft. Okay, so we've got our servo lead shortened here so they match up, which is perfect. So the back end is officially complete, ready to join to the front. So one of the important steps when you're joining an aircraft like this, whether it's permanent or semi-permanent, is you always want to check the fasteners from the manufacturer. So I bet in a case like this, we'll be able to get about half a turn out of these fasteners. And we've got 4 joining the fuselage pieces together. So we're going to check those guys over, tighten them up, get those ready to go. It is nice to see nuts, nylon lock nuts here on the parts that actually join the fuselage together. And the benefit of that is in transport, if these are loose, they're not going to back out. They can only go that far. So in a situation like this, we're not going to put any Loctite on those clamp mechanisms, but if the owner gets this aircraft and he's going to put it together, it's very easy to just take some blue Loctite, drop it on the threads, so when these pieces go together and you tighten those down, they're pretty much stuck and secured properly. All right, so we're ready to put these guys together. I think this is going to be the last time or the only time we put these guys together. Hopefully we don't have to do any removal. I think we've got pretty good access to everything otherwise, so that could be one of the downsides of tightening up those clamps, is that we're a little bit off now compared to where they were before. All right, so we'll take a little bit of BVM dry lube here and pop that in the clamps. So the clamp, there's 2 parts to these clamps. There's a back part and a front part. The front part just kind of slides through. The back part's the actual clamp. So if we're off just a little bit from tightening those guys up, that could cause us issues. Put a little bit of dry lube on our tubes, and we'll give it a try again. Better progress this time. There we go. And when I tighten this up, I'm just making sure that I snug this fuselage together. And then our bottom bolts are through the bottom. So I'm going to flip the fuselage over and we'll do those guys from the underside. All right. Lots of structure to hold on to inside, which is good. There we go. That's not too bad. Okay, so that's sitting nicely together. So actually pretty simple to be able to pull apart the back part of this fuselage. The only kicker is going to be the pipes, which we'll take a look at next. All right, so we've slid our pipes into place and they look good. Obviously we have to do a lot of adjustments here with engines in place still, but pipes go in nicely. So I think the way we're probably gonna have this laid out, the pipes are gonna be sort of a quick release type setup, meaning they're gonna be probably a screw on each side. So when this aircraft gets shipped, the screw comes out, fuselage separates, the pipe can then slide out of the back section when these two are split. And then when it's put back in place, you just slide the pipe into the rear section, join the fuselage pieces, pull the pipe forward, and get it screwed into place. I think that's probably going to be the easiest way to do it, but obviously we're up for change, but let's get some engines out and see how those fit. All right, so we dropped an engine in place, and the first thing I can tell you with the engines is because these Zykoy engines are so small, narrow, we're going to have to make extension plates here, which is totally fine. Now the aircraft itself, the F4 Phantoms always need a little bit of down thrust or down angle to the turbines, and if you look at this one here, you can see the down angle already built into the aircraft, which is awesome. So what I've done is I've just kind of rested the pipe up, eyeballed it, put some clamps here so we're holding it in the right spot, and we take a look down the pipe. We are really stinking close. So that's going to be great. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to work on making some extension plates for these turbines. We're going to make those out of G10, pretty much the same stuff that we used to make our cover plates or plates for the tanks here. So basically we're going to make them out of the same stuff. And then what we'll do is we'll make those extension plates. That'll raise these turbines up, or I guess drop them towards the underside of the aircraft by the thickness of our G10 material, which is fine, because then we can still get our adjustment done with our pipes, which will bring those pipes a little bit closer to the underside of the aircraft. But we do have to check and make sure that it's not going to interfere with the pipe and wing and everything, which right there you can see it's good. We got a decent amount of clearance from that bell mouth, and we're only going to need to go up a couple millimeters, so sort of like that. So we'll still have clearance between the bell mouth of the pipe and the top side of the wing. Okay, so this shows you exactly what we're looking for with the turbines. So we basically made 4 of these G10 plates. Now this is 2mm material. It's the thinnest that I had that was still reasonably strong. I had 2.5mm, but the 2mm is perfect. So that will work good. I used the stock holes, as you can see there, and I also used one of the middle holes there, so we'll put an extra fastener through there. So one turbine's done with the exception of those middle ones. We'll do that to the second turbine as well. All right, so this is the time when we want to get everything lined up here. Now there's a couple important things to a twin setup. So first thing, if you look at those turbines, I think it'll show up on camera, you'll see that they're kind of angled a little bit. So when we put together something like the large Skymaster F-18 that's up there that is for sale, that's got tail mounted turbines. So when you have those turbines mounted all the way at the tail, they're going to be even at more of an angle. Essentially what happens is those turbines need to point to the center of gravity. So on this twin, because they're not all the way at the end, not as critical, but you don't want to take these turbines and put them straight in the rails because it's not going to give you the proper profile. So if you put those turbines straight in the rails, you'll see as you look down the tailpipe, when you look at those tail cones, you'll see that they're going to be pointed to one side of the pipe. So it's very important that that the exhaust cone of the turbine is shaped well all the way around the profile. And so right now we are centered on our pipes, we're centered on our turbines, we're centered on our profile. And the last thing is I've put my joint on the top side of the aircraft. Reason for that is we have a smoke system going in this aircraft, so we want to make sure that the smoke fluid's not leaking out of the joint if it's installed on the bottom of those pipes. So those are some of the considerations here. The depth on these bell mouths, you basically want to split the distance on the bell mouth. So when you're dealing with a big bell mouth like this, you basically want the end of that turbine to sit 50% in the bell mouth, which is roughly about there. So now what we're going to do, now that we're happy with the position of everything, is I'm going to take a very fine pencil and I'm just going to outline our turbine mount plates here on all sides so we can take these turbines out and then have a repeatable location to reinstall them to. All right, there's our final shot before we pull these engines back out. The levels on there just so we can make sure our gap is there, which we have it, and they're both basically exactly the same. We've taken a pencil, outlined both of our turbine mounts. We've marked them, one being the left turbine, turbine 1, 2 being the right turbine, turbine 2. And we are perfectly centered in those pipes and very happy with that. So what we need to do now is we can pull these turbines out and we need to glue on another block on the underside of, or I guess the top side of the turbine rails. And that's going to give us some more structure to screw into when we fasten those pipes down. So pull those turbines out and we'll get some blocks of wood done up next. All right, so I have marked, a little hard to show you, but I've marked the edge of the turbine rail there so we know where the pipe sits. I've done that to all 4 spots. And then I also went in and took Sharpie and marked the center of the engine rail. So if we build out some wood on the underside, we know that our hole needs to be drilled, you know, at this line or below. And then each pipe is also labeled 1 and 2. All right, and both engines have been fully installed. Our pipes are in, engines are in, engines are screwed down. Now none of this stuff is permanent right now because we have to take it out in order to run our lines from the back end forward. So now that we've got everything done though, we can treat all of these holes with some CA. We're using our large pan head screws here on all the turbine mounting and the pipe mounting. Very happy with everything. I don't think there's really a way to get back there because our fuse joint is right here. So without pulling those engines out, we really don't have access to our connectors, which is fine. But yeah, big step done with the engines. And we just have the tanks laid in there just to see how everything works. So here's a shot from the front of the aircraft. So decent access to our lines there to run them wherever we need. And then a top shot here with the saddle tanks placed in place. So when you think about this, the wing's going to be on here, so there's a nice path right down the center for the engines still to get air, so no issues there. All right, I just took the front of the fuselage, got the cockpit rear installed. Reason for that is I just want to kind of make sure that we're happy with our layout of everything and where everything's going. So all of our electronics are going to be mounted right in this area right there. And I think that's the best spot for it. Our UATs are going to be mounted in this area. You got to remember that this is upside down. So UATs are going to be mounted there. I think our fuel pumps will be sort of in this area as well too. And yeah, I'm just kind of getting things laid out. There's not a lot of room in this aircraft to bring wires from the back end to the front end. So if you look at this, we pretty much have to you know, run our wires alongside the turbine here, and then really the only path, clean path, is over top of the tank. So just need to be aware of those things as we're laying stuff out. Those are important steps. So now what we need to do is all of this stuff that we installed right there needs to come out because we need access to our wires, and we're going to do our wire extensions up from the back end. So we'll bring those forward and we'll make sure that we've got enough wire to run to this area right here. All right guys, so we're getting a little bit scattered right now because of the layout stuff. So generally when you're doing a large aircraft like this, you've got, you know, everything kind of going in a front section, but because this aircraft is designed the way it is, where you've got all your access for the center portion when the wings are off, there's a lot more freedom with our layout, and we have to be mindful, of course, of our layout as we move forward. So thinking about how we're going to lay out the access hatch here. So I've decided to leave this open so while the turbines are running you can see them, which means that we've got good access here to get some things set up. So we are going to, these are our new valve holders actually. They will be switched over very soon on our website, but the current valve holders, we've got a few left. We'll get rid of those ones. These ones are a little bit more simplified, a little bit smaller, a little bit easier to install. You can glue them easier, or you can screw them down. So anyways, we'll be using these ones on this aircraft because of space. So we're going to have our on-off valves mounted on the turbine rails there. The turbine sitting in there, just so I have reference, that is on the incorrect side of the turbine rails. It actually goes on the other side. And I'm going to get our screens for the turbines installed right here. Now these turbines we ordered, I think this is called the light version. So the light version comes with a very small ECU, or this is the data relay module. So this is the module for the aircraft. There's no big terminal, and all of our other stuff is displayed and controlled on the screens. So this is going to be kind of our startup area here. So I need to make a bracket for this guy. So they are held just like that. And I'm going to make that out of wood, get that glued in, and I'm going to work on that next here. But that's kind of where those screens are going to sit, so they're not going to interfere with anything. You can still get your hand in here, a blower in here, and I think, just thinking out loud, I think we're going to have our fueling port here as well too. So in between flights, all you need to do is pop open this hatch still. You can fuel here, you can on-off valve here, you can see the turbine starting up, so I think that is exactly how we're going to make that work. All right guys, so we got our screen holder mount made up and mounted. So it's pretty straightforward. I just made that out of 1/8 inch aircraft ply, made a piece that's exactly the same dimensions as our screen holders, a back piece, a couple corner pieces, glued it all together, and right now it's spot glued with CA. We'll have to flip the plane over and touch it up from the back side. There's not a whole lot of gluing surface on this guy because of the structure, the former work structure there, but we'll be able to get it nice and solid. So that's done, and we'll flip the aircraft back over now, and then we'll start working on our wiring from the back end. Okay, so we got both of our wire leads done up here. This is our main one with all of our control surfaces, and then we've got a secondary one with our lighting. So that takes care of the original ones that we ran, these guys down there. So we're going to run those. I want to leave some relief in this area for when we separate the fuselage. But they're going to come up, run underneath the turbine rail here, come down, and then over top of the tank. So we've got lots of excess wire there when we get to the front end, so I've left quite a bit of excess. So we're going to cut and put our ends on. So we're going to get those guys run first. We're going to do our airline for the chute mechanism all at the same time. So we're going to get that done. Once that's done, we're going to work on our afterburner light setup, which is mounted right in this area here, and those are probably going to come this direction and come forward on the other side of the fuselage. So we'll get that done. And you can see the setup here that we used for our screens, and like I was talking about, don't have a lot of gluing surface, so we'll make sure we put some excess glue once this tank's taken out. Now thinking about placement of things, I had the engine installed there, just laid in place. Got our wire done up or installed here, our data relay module, and I think all of that's going to go right in this area right here. That engine lead coming from the engine runs perfectly right to this location. We can mount our fuel pumps right there. Nice short shot to our UATs that are going to mount right there. So I think that's all working out good. And then our lead that feeds our turbine, those are going to come back to our valves, which will be mounted on the top side of the center plate there. So things are going together very well. All right, so all of our wiring is now done from the back end forward. You can see our nice long pieces of wire and airline. We did make a little bit of a change here. So the afterburner light controller is right in this area here. Initially, I thought I would come to this area, run it down and over, but all I did was made a little extension, come down the back of the fuselage and come to our joint location right there. So now all of our connectors are right at that location, all in the same spot. So what we did with those connectors is I used another Ashlock 6-pin connector, but I flipped it around. So there's 2 sets of Ashlock 6 pins, but because they're reversed, there's no way to mess those connectors up when this fuselage is getting put back together, but all of those connectors are in one spot. So that part's done. We've also gone in and we put some shoe goop on all of our wire holders. That makes sure that if the tape fails or when the tape fails, the shoe goop won't let those little holders come loose. So with that stuff being done, I think it's time that we can put our pipes in place at least. I think we're going to hold off on the turbines for a little bit, but we'll get those pipes installed and then we'll kind of think about this area, getting our tanks installed and kind of finishing up the center section. So working on, in my opinion, one of the most complex parts of this aircraft, that is the attachment of the wings. So the wings are a very well thought out area here. We've got a leading edge tube, anti-rotation pin, your main wing tube, a rear wing tube, and really what holds this whole thing together is these huge 4 bolts that join the interlocking wing structure to the fuselage. So one of the struggles here, and I guess these little keyhole things are for the center tank, that's really well thought out. So I was thinking about how the heck they do that, and it's ingenious, absolutely awesome. So going through this, I spent a bunch of time thinking about how to do the connectors for the wings. So initially the first thought is to do a through fitting here, have one of the Robart style connectors for each airline, which is fine. I kind of want to minimize the amount of stuff though that is in the airflow here. So I don't want to have a bunch of stuff hanging down because it's going to be flopping in the wind. So put the other wing on, took it off, put this wing on with the wing tubes, and just kind of taking a look around at things, and I think I found a decent solution. So the leading edge of our wing is just a piece of thin skin because it's not doing anything, it's just sitting in that little groove. Hi, Nez. So if we look at the former work here, we've got a nice big open structure in this front former, so why not put our connectors through there? I think that is the ticket. We've got lots of excess here, so going to the front, going behind the wing tube is no problem. But if we do that, and the way I'm thinking about this is, if this was my plane and I'm taking it to the field to fly it, how would I want to put it together? We can put the one wing on, get everything plugged in through here in the front, bolt it up. We can slide the other wing on, have it spaced out a little bit, have our connectors maybe and tuck them in, I don't really know. Or this wing goes together as one complete structure. You have it sitting back a little bit. I'm thinking of like a Carf Ultra Flash with a little gap here in the wing to fuselage. So it's kind of just sitting up on this part of the fuselage, and then you're able to work all those connectors at the front. In my mind, that's probably the best way to put it together. If all those connectors are coming through the bottom, it's going to be a real struggle. You'll need somebody to hold this wing up for you. I think that was what initially made me think about this the most. So pretty sure that we're going to go through the front. Obviously that impedes our UAT mounting a little bit. I don't think that'll be a problem. We can work around that, but I think that's our best solution. So sorry for the long-winded little segment there, but I'm just sharing my thoughts with you guys and my thought process behind the wings of this F4. I'm happy with everything. I want it to be the same as if I was to own this aircraft. That's how I do it. So, all right, so path for wing connectors is figured out. This is way better than having it go inside the fuselage, in my opinion. So you lay the entire wing structure put together up here, have it sitting back a little bit, make all your connectors. The excess sits inside the wing and you're good. And there's a shot there of the wing side, so lots of room, especially in this pocket here. There's lots of room in that pocket for all the excess. So glad that worked out. So now we don't need to worry about the wings. We'll be doing that in one of the upcoming episodes of this build. So, but that is all good. We know where we're running everything. And then now that we've got this sorted, we know exactly how we're running everything as well. Now keep in mind our lines, our air lines, are going to come to this location to a T and then split off to each side for each of the colors. So there's going to be 5 T's here, a split, and then we're going to have 5 connectors per side, plus an ash lock connector for our wing wiring. Now the wing wiring is pretty simple. We've got 3 leads for flap servo, 3 leads for aileron servo, 2 leads for one light, 2 leads for another light. So 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we'll use a 12-pin ash lock connector on each of the wings. And we ended up getting 2 mounts. I totally forgot to video this, but we got 2 mounts done up here for our fuel pumps. So those are installed. Installed this with a little bit of CA, but mostly high sol. So the CA is holding it in place right now while the high sol cures. Also took a Sharpie marker and wrote on the pump which direction the fuel flow is, because you can't see the one that's printed on there. And of course, the pump on the other side of the fuselage is backwards to that one. So with that stuff done, we can now focus on getting our tanks run, fuel lines and everything run, wiring run. That's going to be the next things to do. So we do have to figure out and get our lines hooked up for the tanks. This one, it's mainly the vent line. So that vent line is going to be coming to this pickup line right here. So we need to get that installed because you've got decent access to the bungs or the pickups, but you don't have good access to that vent line at the very bottom of the fuselage, or in this case, the top of the fuselage. So we're going to get that line hooked up, and then we can get the tank installed, get that run and figured out for fuel path. Also, we're going to get our vents installed, our DreamWorks vents, and those are just going to go in these areas right here. So we're going to have the fuel vent on this side for that tank. We're going to have the smoke vent on this side for the smoke tank. All right, so we got our UATs assembled as well. Primary reason for this is to make sure that we have our fuel tubing and everything sized properly. So these are going to be for turbine 1 and 2. And then we've got another smaller UAT, which is going to be for the smoke system. It's nice to use one of these in the smoke system because it helps eliminate bubbles. It also allows you to have a fill point for your system instead of adding a T into the system. So one of those smaller ones will be for smoke system. And now that we've got our tubing all laid out, we can pull this main tank out and get our tubes installed there to allow us to progress with the fuel system. All right, so lots of progress here. We ended up running all of our wires underneath our tanks. Love it. It's super clean. There's a nice gap there as well too. We initially had all the wires from the back end coming underneath there, and then also ran the turbine wire underneath there as well. So it keeps the wires all neat and tidy. Put some power box wire extensions onto the data relay module screens, or the GSU screens. Those are run to the location where the data relay module is going to be. And we have our coily pump wire installed as well. So next thing to do is get these guys fastened down. Just with some Velcro is going to be the best way to do it. All of our tanks are installed. Smoke tank, nothing's been hooked up as far as lines go. And we've got our line run from our main tank to our secondary tank. And then our vent line is also run as well. So we've got our fuel vent installed here, our smoke vent installed here. So fuel plumbing or tank setup is essentially done. Next thing to do is basically get all the turbine stuff wrapped up, and then we can start thinking about moving this stuff forward. All right, and there we go. Everything is pretty much buttoned up in the midsection of this aircraft. I'm happy with everything. It looks good. The only thing left to do for the turbines is run our fuel lines to the on-off valves, which we haven't mounted yet, but we're waiting to flip the plane over, which we're doing next. Fuel tubing has all been done, so we've got our vent line run to our vent. We've got this line here running to the vent of our primary tank, and then we've got our spare lines going forward. Those will go to the UATs. Smoke vent has been installed. Our pull line for the smoke system hasn't been installed yet because I don't know where that's going. And then we've got our turbine electronics installed. So that is awesome. We're going to flip this plane over now, and we are going to work on our access hatch stuff. We want to get that done in case we need to pull the turbines out. These turbines have just been screwed down right now. They don't have any CA or anything in the screws. And yeah, so we'll work on the access hatch side of things before we move any further forward. All right, so we've got the F4 Phantom flipped over on its belly, and I just want to show you guys inside here. That looks really good. Yeah, just the reflection off the tailpipes and those little engines, and oh man, that looks really good. Really happy with that. Our valve holders are just sitting in there. I haven't glued them down or fastened them down or anything yet. But yeah, I just wanted to share that with you guys. That looks really impressive, so I like that. On-off valves for the turbines are going to be there. I think I'm going to put the fill valve in here, I think still, and I'm just trying to debate on whether to put the smoke on-off valve right here as well. That kind of makes the most amount of sense. Maybe I'll give that some thought. Yeah, anyways, there we go. There's the access hatch. And not a lot of wires yet because obviously our lines coming from our wings aren't there yet. That's where a lot of that stuff's going to come. So maybe what we'll do now that we've got the fuselage flipped over, is we'll start to think about our UAT mounting since we have to get those glued in place. So we'll probably do that next, and that'll allow those things to cure overnight. And our final steps for this evening, we've got our UATs glued in place. So mounted those onto some plywood strips and glued the plywood strips down. Kind of split the difference, so we kept it about this far away from that back joint where the wings, the leading edge of the wings are going to go. And that our wire basically for the wings and everything is going to come right in between these two UATs. And then of course needed to keep it a little bit further away from, or a little bit away from this front joiner piece because we want to be able to have our fill valves or fill lines attached there. So anyways, it was a good compromise back and forth. So those are done. And we also got our shutoff valves for the turbines installed. Those mounts are glued in place, so they're just resting and curing right now. So we're going to leave this stuff overnight and come back to it all tomorrow. All right, and one last little thing we did last night was we had some extra glue, and what I did was I laid the front part of the fuselage on its side, figured out where we were going to mount the air compressor, and that's exactly where we're mounting the air compressor. So that's glued and stuck in place. Now these air compressors, this is the V-Speak one, if you glue it in place like that, so you glue the base in place, and if you ever have to change the compressor, you undo the 4 Allen key bolts, compressor pops off, new compressor pops on, and it just reuses the same mount. So that's why I glue them in place like that. Works really well, and of course you can stick it in a random spot that's not going to affect anything. So our general equipment layout here, I'm going to be building a main board, I'll call it. That's going to be fastened to this area. We're going to probably have some standoffs so it's raised up a little bit, and that's kind of the plan for the main board. I'm going to run the wires probably underneath the board, or at least most of the wires, and then down that side, so what would be the right side of the aircraft, we're going to have another extension board coming forward, and that's where our air valves are going to go, or all the air stuff is going to go on this side. Now the Central Box 400 does take up a fair bit of this room, so we'll have, you know, our Central Box on there, maybe our Cortex. We'll probably put our lighting controller like on the side. So anyways, we'll figure all that out later on. But I'm just thinking about the cockpit here and how I want to get this done. So what I want to do and how I want to accomplish this is you can't leave the cockpit in its current format if you ever want to take it out. The only way to take this out right now is to take it out through the fuse separation. Without taking the front out, I don't know. Anyways, you can't just take this rear part out and get access to this area, and that's what we want to fix. So here's my initial thoughts on this cockpit. I don't know if we're going to do anything in this video. I'm still thinking about it. But these side pieces, I want to have those screwed down from the top. So I want to have a piece of wood or something glued to the side of the fuselage. These pieces can just stay in place. And then the actual cockpit tub here, I want to cut down the sides like that. You can see here, sort of like this. And I want this tub to be able to come in and out. So if you want to get access to anything there, you can just take this tub, take the canopy off, obviously. You're gonna have to take the front dash panel off because that's screwed in place and that's part of what holds this down. And maybe we won't have to later on, but, and then we'll just take this tub and it'll just pop up out of the aircraft. That's my theory. Now, the only kicker, I was thinking about gluing those pieces of wood in right now because then everything would get lined up nicely. The downside is if we glue those pieces of wood in, there is absolutely no way for us to get this cockpit out. And the other thing I want to accomplish with this cockpit setup is I want to be able to see the UATs while we're filling. So the back of the cockpit obviously is sitting right here. We do have some viewing angle down at this direction. So when this is all done, if we have this area kind of cut out on each side of the dude, of the pilot, then you'll be able to see down there into the UAT. So that's my goal. And that would be this area right here that would be cut out. So just some thoughts for you guys. And I don't know exactly the solution right now on how to get this all done. All right, so I think I came up with a good plan for the cockpit. I hope it's a good plan. First thing I did was I used my bandsaw to cut off our circle parts there. So when this is all put together, we'll have nice viewing windows right here. So that part's done. Next thing I did is made sure that I knew what my next steps were. So what I'm gonna do is I'm using my razor saw rather than my bandsaw to make this cut nice and fine. And we're basically cutting off each side of the cockpit like this. Then what's going to happen is I will take a piece of wood, a thin strip of aircraft ply. It'll be glued to this side and it will support the cockpit side. So the cockpit can come in and out, and these side pieces are supporting the cockpit from moving. Now, we will probably have a support that goes across the entire fuselage, like that, at the back here, because we want everything to be supported, not all the weight sitting on those pieces we're gonna have mounted to the side of the fuselage. Hopefully this makes sense and you're following what I'm talking about. We do have the front support there, which holds the front of the cockpit, and that mounts in this location right there. So I think that's a good plan. So I'm just taking my razor saw and cutting these guys at a decent angle. So before I cut through this one, I'm gonna mark this one and get it mostly cut as well. Okay, so we've got our cockpit all cut up. We've got our support pieces glued in place. You can see there a better idea of exactly what we're doing. So these guys now interlock perfectly. And the theory here is our side pieces will get mounted to the fuselage. The actual cockpit tub can just come in and out very easily. So now in order to get this stuff all lined up, we do need to get this kind of temporary glued back to place or back together. So I just have some pieces of wood here, and we're going to use those pieces of wood, and we are just going to join the cockpit tub together with some dots of CA. That'll all be removed later on once we're all glued, but this is the way to keep everything lined up so it all works perfectly when we glue this, the support pieces into the fuselage. All right, and there you can see we've got our pieces, 3 per side, holding the cockpit together. So again, those will all be removed once we get the tub in place and secured and figured out. All right, so we got the cockpit all back installed, and I screwed the seat down with our 2 back screws just to make sure that the positioning and everything is correct and everything's sitting properly. Now we won't be using the side screws to hold the seat in, but I don't think that'll be an issue. We'll figure out another way if we need it. So now with this all installed, nice and solid, we can start to think about our side support. So initially, I think what I'm going to do here is we're going to get a side support glued in to the fuselage, and that will, this control panel will screw into that side support. So we'll do that. So we'll do one on each side, and then we'll also have, I think, a cross member coming across like this. And that cross member is basically going to be glued into the side of the fuselage and provide a support for these two pieces as well. So it should be nice and solid, and there's no reason to make this cross member piece removable, because if you undo your screw from each top, these pieces will just come out and this will just be resting on there. So the easiest way I think to do this is we're going to flip this upside down, and that way we don't have to worry about clamping anything in place, and we will be able to do those support pieces and let them cure properly. All right, we got everything figured out here. So we've got our front part of our fuselage flipped over, sitting on our exercise balls, and we've cut 3 pieces of wood. So these two on the side are exactly the same, and those are going to get glued to the side of the fuselage. This piece here is going to also get glued to the side of the fuselage, and the purpose of these pieces is to support our side structures essentially. So these are going to be screwed into those pieces right there. This one is just going to sit there and support everything. So now we're going to mix up some glue and get these guys glued in place. All right, I just want to give a shout out to you channel members. Thank you guys for being channel members. Appreciate it. Hopefully you're enjoying seeing all the videos early. If you're not a channel member and you're watching this, that's what channel membership is. It is a paid thing. There's some links down below. If you become a member of the channel, you're going to get to see all of our videos early. Now, generally, we've got 2 to 4 videos, which is 1 to 2 weeks of videos uploaded early on the channel, and all of our channel members get to see those things first. All right, guys, and that wraps up video number 4 in the Skymaster F4 XL series. I say this often, but I think we got a lot accomplished in this video. It's nice to have kind of the midsection done in this airframe, and also the cockpit moving forward. The big steps for me, the things that I knew I would spend the most time on, was fuel tanks, cockpit, and that was kind of the 2 biggest things, because I knew the cockpit was going to be an issue. I'm glad we got some nice solutions figured out and ironed out in this video. So next video, we're moving on to the wings. We're letting this stuff kind of glue and harden and everything. So that means we're starting on the wings in the next video. So that's going to be a video probably all by itself. So stay tuned for that one, guys. So thanks guys so much for watching. We'll see you in video 5 for the wings.